Welcome to Super Agents Live. This is the one place where you can come and hear the most successful people in real estate. You'll hear how these super agents built their businesses, how they stay productive, and how they stay motivated. Who am I? My name's Toby Salgad, and I made my first million in real estate. And I'm your host for the next 30 minutes while we talk to yet another amazing real estate entrepreneur. Stay tuned.
Let's go! Yeah!
All right, today on the show is Dave Jenks. Dave is a trainer with the Carnegie Institute, a sought-after speaker, and a best-selling author with 4 books to his name. Hey, Dave, thanks for taking the time out today.
Toby, good to be with you.
Hey, so kick it off a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Well, you know, it's a long story, but it's an interesting one. 30 years in the real estate industry. After 40 years of preparing to do it, I've kind of been a lifelong entrepreneur, teacher, student. And so my life in real estate has really been, I came into it fairly mature in business. I had taught for the Dale Carnegie Institute, and I had taught for in higher education. And so I came in and I really began at the level of leadership and training agents, training brokers. I was with Century 21 up in the Northeast, and I moved with them down to Texas, then joined this little startup company in Austin, Texas called Keller Williams, and was with them for 12 years. We went from 2,000 agents to 72,000 agents in that time, and that's it. And along that way, just kind of, I think the heart of this is I have been a student of the real estate game. I can't tell you, I've worked with thousands of mega producers, top agents, as you mentioned in your introduction. I've written, co-authored, 5 best-selling books, including The Millionaire Real Estate Agent and Shift, and Your First Home, and that's what I've done. And then right now I have a business called FreeEnterpriseWarriors.com, which is dedicated to bringing training and support to entrepreneurs. And specifically, right now I'm on assignment working with a group in Minnesota called Master Networks, which is building a series of chapters across the country, regions and chapters, that provide training and support and service and referrals for people that own their own businesses.
Wow, you have a lot going on. So let me understand something real quick. So you were a trainer prior to getting into real estate. I mean, were you sort of a motivational speaker? I mean, how would you, because you just jumped into real estate as a leader. Like, talk to me a little bit about that. I think that's interesting.
Well, I think the interesting thing is I've never viewed myself as a motivational speaker. That doesn't feel right to me, and I've heard so many motivational speakers that aren't very motivational. They try to be, but they're not. I find myself a pragmatic teacher of people who want to achieve their goals. So first when I first got into sales and marketing, not in real estate, I took the Dale Carnegie sales course, and I was so impressed by what they taught me as a professional salesperson. I didn't even understand it was a profession. I didn't understand it had a set of principles and skills and ways in which you did it better than others. And so I learned that, and I became an instructor in the Dale Carnegie Institute, sort of as an adjunct. I mean, I had a full-time real job, and then I one night a week would teach the Dale Carnegie courses. And in that, I worked with a lot of people in sales, including a lot of real estate agents. So when I came into the real estate business, through a contact, one of my students actually, who guided me to link up with Century 21 up in upstate New York, I really then began to teach real estate, how to run real estate brokerages, how to run businesses, how to help agents launch their careers, and kind of every aspect of the real estate business. And as I taught it, of course, I became the student. I mean, I really worked with top producers, and I was just a curious guy. I'd ask them how they did it, but they did, just like you're doing, Toby, on your program. And maybe you've done in many aspects of your life. I became a student of the game, and then I began to accumulate that, and that instructed my teaching. And then ultimately, once I got with Keller Williams and Gary Keller, it instructed the books we wrote.
So you talked about skills and principles. You've dealt with or worked with a lot of top producers. when you look at a real estate entrepreneur, now whether, and I'll ask this as a broad question, whether that is somebody beginning or somebody at the top producing level, what do you think the biggest hurdle is for these real estate entrepreneurs that they have to overcome to find success?
I think there's three, and they go right in order. Okay, the first one you have to deal with is dealing with freedom and autonomy.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is 95% of all people are employed, and they require or they rely on someone else telling them what to do and when to do it, and kind of being their motivators, when to show up for work, that kind of thing. And even though they may be ambitious and they may be active, it's that extra external structure that gives them, let's say, the show up and the drive. Now, in real estate, that's all gone. You are an independent contractor. You're on your own. You're free. You've got this immense freedom to do what you want, when you want. And there are so many people. The reason they struggle in real estate is because they don't know how to deal with that freedom. A good friend of mine once said, he said, Dave, people get into real estate for the freedom, the flexibility, and the promise of untold wealth. Yeah. He said they take the freedom and the flexibility, therefore they never get the wealth. So the first thing you have to learn and master in real estate is having your own internal structure, your own structure of your time and activities. You have to show up on a regular basis. You have to do regular task-oriented things, whether you want to or not, like you would in a real job. And when you learn that discipline, now you have a chance to be successful in real estate. Now the second hurdle is mastery. You have to realize there's a set of skills, scripts, dialogues, presentations, how to say things, how to evaluate property, how to deal with legal contracts and all of the things, and knowing financing. So there's a whole realm of knowledge and skills that you must master. And then the third thing that people struggle with is they think it's a self-employed job, so they always get stuck in doing it themselves rather than realizing that they can become a brand and a business. That's what we wrote about in the Millionaire Real Estate Agent, and they can use leverage other people, and they can take that brand and that business and really turn it into a true business that's sending them ultimately passive business income, as Robert Kiyosaki calls it, profit, even though they don't show up every day in that business. So I think those are the three big hurdles along the way in terms of someone being really successful in the real estate profession.
That was unbelievable. That was chock full of wisdom right there. So we have discipline, we have mastery, and then we have fundamentally building a team, right? Working on your business instead of in your business. Out of those three, what do you think is the biggest thing or the main one that people get wrong, most realtors get wrong?
Well, I mean, I think they go in order, right? And I would say the one thing is that a lot of, and then each one are, I'll tell you what, underpinning each one is the idea that being learning-based is the key. In other words, if you say to yourself, I'm going to learn this business, I'm going to learn its fundamentals, it's knowledge-based, the things I get paid for, right? My knowledge of the market, my knowledge on how to price properties, my knowledge on how to get properties to sell, my knowledge of contracts and all the legal law around real estate, and my knowledge of financing. So I have to master that knowledge base. So I have to be learning oriented. I have to be absorbing it all the time. We used to, people would say, well, Dave, it's not rocket science. And we'd go, oh, yes, it is. In fact, anything taken to the highest level is rocket science. If you're going to be good, if you're going to be in the top 1% of any profession, I promise you, it's rocket science. You've got to study it. You've got to know it. So I think it's being learning-based. And the second part of the learning is being able to say, others do it very well. How do they do it? Just like you're doing, Toby, with Super Agents Live. You're going to the best people saying, how do you do it? Well, if I'm a smart agent who isn't at the top of my game yet, I'm going to pay attention to what those people are saying that you're interviewing because they've gone before me. And they've learned these things, and they've mastered them. So I'm going to learn what they've mastered, and then I have to do the work of actually mastering that skill. Scripts and dialogues is a great place. One of the things I learned as a Dale Carnegie student when I first got into sales and marketing was that the first thing you must do is master your presentation. You must have a sales presentation that goes through the 5 steps of selling, and if you master that track, It then allows you to prospect for business better because you're confident and you know what you have to offer. And it allows you to get people to say yes to working with you because you present it so effectively. And even though you'll master this kind of, I'll call it, very large sales presentation, you'll only use pieces of it depending on who you're with. But the mastering of that sales presentation, and inherent in that, Toby, is the mastering of what's called, and you've heard people say it all the time, scripts and dialogues, which I just call the words of influence. In other words, there are better ways to say things than others. And most people just stay in their normal kind of ho-hum, mediocre way of saying things. And it has no impact. People don't respond to it. People don't say yes to it. But when you learn how to master the way to say things, the way to ask for business, the way to make a presentation, the way to get them involved in the presentation, the way to build connection with them, the way to get them to say yes, the way to negotiate a win-win deal. All those things include language, scripts, and dialogues, and that takes a lot of time to master and role play and work out and get good at. But once you do, you become just unstoppable in the world of sales.
I agree. And if I can jump in there, if I look at your three things, discipline, mastery, and you were talking about scripts and dialogues, there are a lot of resources out there for people to read a book and they can learn about discipline, right? They can learn about scripts and dialogues and how to master that. I think the third piece, that building a team, right, building a real business, I think it seems like there's not. Where do people go to learn that? I mean, you know what I mean? There's not really books on, hey, listen, this is how to hire. You can be an awesome salesperson, but do you know how to hire or make your first set of hires and get the right people? And if you don't have the right people, I mean, that really that'll hurt your business.
Yes. That's why we wrote the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. So the very first thing I would say to anyone in real estate, and I'm not saying this in a self-serving way, is read that book. There's a reason it's the number one best-selling book in the real estate category on Amazon today. Right today, if you looked it up and looked up the real estate category best-selling book, it would be number one. It's been number one for 7 years. It's been published for over 10.
Wow.
Why does it stay number one? Because people keep saying to each other, have you read MREA? Have you read the Red Book? Have you read Millionaire Real Estate Agent? And you go to a top agent and say, where did you learn what you learned? And they went, I read Dave and Gary's book. And the reason it's so true is that's what we did. We had studied and worked with people who were turning their self-employed job into a true business. And yes, hiring was the third part of that. It's leads, listings, and leverage. So you have to master leads. That's marketing, getting people to call you, come to you, build endless referrals. It's about listings, getting them to list with you because listing is your inventory and your yard signs are your billboards. And that's how you build market share locally. And then you have to get into leverage. And leverage is about, actually, it's interesting, leverage is about, first, productivity. So a lot of mistakes people make, and we can talk about this later if you want to, about the hiring thing, is they hire someone to just do a part of the task and not understanding that first hire is to make you more productive. So they ought to do anything you need done for you to make better use of your time and spend more time on your dollar productive activities. So that whole process of how you hire, and even in that book, we do a short form of it. There's a process on how to hire people, how to find talent, how to send out a missing person report so your people that you know will send you good candidates, how to select among those candidates, and then how to empower them, the first 100 days to productivity. That's in the book.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that. I should have read more of your book. So your career has certainly had an interesting arc to it. Can you tell us a little bit about your first breakthrough deal or that sort of first eureka moment you had that put you on this path?
Well, I think my first eureka moment, it was outside of real estate. I mean, it was really going to the Dale Carnegie sales course and understanding that selling was a profession, that it had a set of mastery skills, that if you mastered your presentation and your handling of objections, people's resistances to saying yes to you, that you could be very good at whatever you did. And then I translated that over. So I would say that was kind of, for me, the breakthrough. And then as I got into the real estate game, and it didn't take me long. It probably took me 6 months to see that there was such a differentiation between the top 5% to 10% of real estate agents and the rest. And yeah, there was the bottom that would never succeed, the 30 or 40% that kind of churned through the business, and then there was sort of the middle ones maybe stuck at a certain level of production. But up at the top, those people had a very different approach. And the number one approach they had, which just struck me, was that they were learning based. I remember a guy, my number one Century 21 agent in the Albany, New York area, upstate New York area, where he had worked previously with General Electric, and now he was a top producer in real estate. And he was at a training session I was doing on financing, and I said to him, I said, Dave, his name is David also, I said, Dave, here you are, you're the top agent in this whole area. This is kind of a fundamental course in real estate finance. Why are you at it? And he said, Dave, because when I was at General Electric, they put 10% of all of their earnings back into research and development and getting better. So he said, I devote 10% of my time and 10% of my money into improving what I do. That's why I'm here. And that was just that was a light bulb, an aha. And it is one of the differentiators. People that are successful in this business go to more training, get more coaching, and devote more of their time and their money in their own personal development.
Wow. So you, in your career, right? So you've worked with top producers, you've written 4 books, you've been on the New York Times bestseller list. Have you ever had a super agent or superstar moment where you felt like you've arrived?
Well, it's interesting what that moment feels like. Yes, I have. And I had it when I was an athlete, and I had it when I was a student, and I had it, I won the Dale Carnegie sales course contest at the end. They had everyone do sales presentations, and that was kind of one of those things. And so what happens in peak moments is you realize you are on the top of the crest of this wave of all the work you did to get there. That's what it feels like. So, for example, for me, it was being out on the road doing our book tours, first in 2004 and in 2003 and 2004 particularly. I was out there teaching Millionaire Real Estate Agent, and then a year later it was teaching the Millionaire Real Estate Investor, which was our second book. And then I think probably ultimately in 2008 when I was out teaching across the country, and we had really, until the Winds had this immense momentum, and so we had, 700, 800,000 people plus at these events. They were just there to really learn and understand what we had put in this book, because we were dealing with the shift in the market, the downshift into this really rough market that real estate had been in. And just as I was up there sharing that and realizing they were really paying attention to what I had to say, and I realized I was conveying this valuable information to them, that was just a peak experience. But what I realized, it's what I said, I realized it was all of the work and effort that had gone into doing the research, doing the writing, that had finally gotten me to that point. And I think when I've met with top agents who are at the very top of their game and they're being featured on a panel, or they're being asked to speak on how they got to where they got, almost always, and I've interviewed them just like you're interviewing me, Toby, and they have always reflected on at these peak moments where they know that everything's going well, their business is generating a lot of money, they've got a team, they're buying the things they want to buy, they have financial security, all that kind of thing, and they reflect on that and they say, I am here because I went through the tough times, I went through the hard times, I put in the work, I gained the mastery, I made my mistakes, I learned from them, I made it on, and this is just the accumulation of a lot of hard work.
There's no shortcut.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah, wow. Unbelievable.
There isn't a shortcut. What's interesting is that to the outside world, this is why you always have to be careful as a high achiever. Don't look at somebody's outside and judge it against your inside. Don't look at somebody else's current success and judge it against your current failure or difficulties. Because remember, they went through those too. They did. There's no question. I don't know of anyone that achieves at a high level that hasn't had their valley of the shadow and their tough times and their have to pull themselves up by their bootstrap, their times of self-doubt. I certainly had those myself. I've dealt with in my life because actually of a family issue, family genetics. I've dealt with cyclical depression. So I've always had these mood swings that I've had to really learn how to handle because they're really like the weather. They kind of come in and it's almost like I am in Boulder, Colorado, and we just had these amazing floods. And it's torn up the place. Well, and what was that? That was bad weather. Now we have to deal with the result of what happened in the bad weather. I think life is a lot like that. Things can come at you in weather patterns, and you just have to make the best of them when you're in the toughest weather. And then when it's sunshiny and you're feeling good and all that, then you realize that you survived, you stayed strong, you learned how to handle those tough times, and that actually has made you more resilient. And for me, in the sense of these mood swings and cyclical depression, I really learned how to even prevent it. Okay, that's just because you learn that skill.
Well, thank you, Dave, for sharing that personal story about your cyclical depression.
Sure.
One of the themes that you touch on, and you have touched on this whole time, is that being learning based. So I want to talk to you about productivity. How do you personally stay productive and focused on a day-to-day basis?
I think the way I do it is I keep reflecting on what it is I want. For many times in my life, because of that, I was raised with a very strict father, and he kind of used to say to me, whenever I would complain about the amount of my allowance or what can I do more to earn more money around the house, he'd say, if you don't like what you have, we can take that away too. And that was just a message as a young child. Wow, if I complain about what I have and I want more, that I could lose that too, what I have. So I kind of had to spend, I'd say probably once I got into my adult life, 15 or 20 years, really learning and being willing to actually ask for what I wanted. So I think the first thing you do is you ask for what you want from the world, from life, from God. Whatever your belief system is, you write it down. You say, this is what I want. I want this, I want this, I want this. And it's okay. It's really important to want things. Now, what you have to do is be happy with what you have, an attitude of gratitude for what you have, while going after what you want. So I'd say there's a two-part strategy that I find in my own productivity. One is constantly being aware of what I want, what my goals are, what I want to accomplish, what goods will come from that. That's classic goal setting, but I do it in a deeper way. I have dream listing, and then I turn some of those into goals. I'm careful what I commit to. But once I have it down, I know what I'm trying to accomplish, what I want, what the payoff of that will be. And then on the other hand of it, I count my blessings. I reflect on what I have that I'm just happy for and joyful about. Because that is where my positiveness comes from. My positiveness comes from the fact that I am grateful for the way things are, and I'm paying attention to those things. I'm not just taking them for granted. And then at the same time, I've got the aspirational part of me that's saying, oh yeah, but you could go here. And that's what I'm striving for. So it's that balance. It's almost like, it's almost like skiing down a slope or surfing. You're trying to stay on that balance, between being on solid ground of appreciation for where you are, while you're trying to pick up speed and maximize your movement toward where you want to go.
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing sort of a little bit of a Napoleon Hill concept in there a little bit.
He's, clearly, I don't know if he wouldn't have been my instructor in that. It would have been more, my wisest instructor in that regard is Dale Carnegie. Because he wrote a book. It's not the one, and he has two books that are in the top 500 of Amazon today, which is amazing to be in the Amazon top 500 and have books that you wrote in the 1930s.
Yeah, right.
That's amazing. How to Win Friends and Influence People is the greatest book on communication and leadership that's ever been written. Okay, just on communication, number one, how to connect with people. Two, how to influence them. in a positive way, and 3, How to Be a Leader, How to Change People's Attitudes. That book is just a classic. It's amazing, and that's why it still stays up there. But his other one that people know less of is a book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And I can tell you so many, and I've read the self-help literature forever, and that's kind of been one of my areas of expertise. And, you keep reading books and you go, well, okay, that's a whole book, but it's really, that whole book was said in one chapter of how to stop worrying and start living. So those would be it. Now, I am a believer in the positive thinking mindset of Think and Grow Rich, which is Napoleon Hill. So Think and Grow Rich is a classic book on as you think, so shall it be. I mean, what you think about is what you become. So it's that, now they call it The Secret, which is kind of funny, but that's the latest version of the law of attraction and the law of how you think is what you become. So, but that's good. But I'll tell you the one that's the book that I think is the most pragmatically instructive about this path of balance, is Stephen Covey's famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in a lot of my classes, I help people in 10 minutes memorize the 7 habits because they're so short. They're short and sweet and clear, and so they stay in your mind as kind of a reminder, like a guidance system. Here are the 7 habits. Okay, this is what highly effective people do. Am I doing those 7 habits? They're really good. So those are my best classic sources of wisdom that I follow.
And those are all fantastic. I'm going to have you do something a little bit hard here. If you had to choose out of all those books, let's say I had $15, I have $20, I can only buy one book. What book should I go out and buy?
Are you in real estate?
I'm in real estate.
The Millionaire Real Estate Agent.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because it's an amazing collection of the fundamental wisdom of real estate and also personal achievement. In other words, in there, there's a chapter on the 9 ways millionaire real estate agents think, and that, just from an attitude point of view, those ways are just so clear. Then there's the 4 stages of how you build a real estate career, and the 3 L's, leads, listings, and leverage, but it talks about why each one of those are the keys to unlocking it. So for a beginning agent, it right away unlocks their path. And then, of course, for those that want to go big, as you said, build a team or build a business, then it's got all of the how-tos of doing that. And then the final thing it has that is so valuable is, well, that's 2 things. I'm going to say 2 things. One is it gives you some really tangible ways to grab hold of the business. For example, on page 95, there are the 10 things you do for sellers and the 10 things you do for buyers. If you mastered page 95, you would already have your presentation done. In other words, if you could remember and talk, even just using the words that are there about the 10 things you do for sellers and the 10 things you do for buyers, you would have your seller presentation and your buyer presentation done. In the very back of the book, the thing that's inspirational about the book is it shows you what it looks like when you take your real estate career to what we call the 7th level, and why that is such a worthy goal of someone who's in the real estate business. So you get to see what the end game looks like. You get to see it so you can move toward it. And of course, then it has the pathway to get there. So even though it isn't a classic all-time personal bestseller for people in all things like Think and Grow Rich and The Magic of Thinking Big and and Dale Carnegie's books and those kind of classics, if I'm in real estate, that would be the one book I would want to be constantly rereading.
It sounds like it's more pragmatic and actionable.
It is. It's both. It's inspirational and it's pragmatic and it's actionable. I love your words.
Awesome. Well, we're nearing the end here a little bit. We're kind of already in the lightning round, but let me ask you a couple quick questions. Do you have an internet tool, kind of like an Evernote, that you're in love with?
No, I'll tell you what. My favorite, tool I use for staying connected with people is Facebook. I mean, it just is. To me, it's an amazing way to stay in touch with people and connect, because I believe it's all about connections anyway. And I think it's the way that you connect with people that you're in relationship with to know what's going on with them. And it's not like I spend a lot of time on it, but I've got enough, kind of ways I sort of skim through things or flag things that I pay attention to the most important thing. But other than that, I don't have a particular tool like Evernote or whatever. Nope, I don't. I believe in technology. I've been using it since the mid '80s, and on the internet since the early days of Yahoo in the mid '90s, and then on. I believe in it. I believe in the power of it, as long as you don't get locked into the. I read a wonderful book called The Shallows, written about 3 years ago, about how people are losing their ability to memorize things and concentrate on things and retain things because of the way they bounce around so fast on the internet. I think that's a problem, so I only do a little bit of it.
Good. What are the first 3 steps a new agent should do to begin building his business in the next 10 days?
Well, first of all, understand it's not 10 days. But and other than, which you're going to say would be the obvious answer, read the front end of Millionaire Real Estate Agent, because that'll set your whole path for you. I would say that the first thing I would do is I would look around at the best agents in my office, and I would ask to take them for a half-hour cup of coffee, and I would ask them what's been the key, where did they do their best learning. The second thing I would do is I would right away start to build a little library, I'll call it, of scripts and dialogues that I would master. In fact, if somebody listening to this, Toby, wants, I have a thing called The Power of Your Words, which is a 5-page document of my favorite scripts. They're my favorite because they are models for doing other scripts also. There's a sort of a formula for the way you ask for business, and there's a formula for the way you present something. There's a formula for the way you justify what you do as a real estate agent and why you get paid what you get paid. And some of those scripts are in there. So if they sent a quick email to Dave@DaveJenks.com, that's Jenks, so Dave@DaveJenks.com, I'd be happy to send them and just put on it, send me your favorite scripts. And I would send it to them. So I would begin to take those and I would begin to play with them to learn the language, and I'd pick a partner somewhere and I'd start to do role plays. Those would be the first things I would do.
Fantastic. Well, Dave, give us one piece of parting advice. Let us know where we can find you, and we'll sign off.
Okay, well, you can find me at DaveJenks.com or at Free Enterprise Warriors. That's plural. Free. Although I think we have the singular too, but free is one word. Free Enterprise Warriors.com, which is our website. And as I said, my email is Dave@DaveJenks.com. I'm happy to respond to anything that people ask about there. And I would just say the one thing I would leave is be learning based and master your presentations.
God, thank you so much, Dave. You're such an easy guy to talk to, and I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Toby, good to be here, and I really like what you're doing with Super Agents Live. I think that being able to gather the best perspectives and share those with other agents in the industry is a really worthy mission. So good luck with it.
Well, thank you. And well, you heard it, folks. That was Dave Jenks talking about mastering core knowledge and skills. Dave was also a big proponent of using leverage and building a team. I really like the story he shared of GE and how they pour 10% of their profits back into research and development. Maybe that's something you can start doing, whether that's hiring a coach or joining a mastermind. I truly hope you got something out of this episode. We have a long journey ahead of us, both you and I want to continue bringing you these free mini coaching sessions. I do this for free, and I hope I can later bring on some sponsors to help, pay for our staff. As you know, in real estate, nobody gets paid until somebody buys from you. And for us, we can't get paid until we grow our audience big enough. I don't know you yet, but I'd like to ask a favor. It would really help us out. Please share this content with a friend and help us grow our audience. Also, if you have a minute, go to iTunes, leave a rating and review, and subscribe. And if you do leave a review, hopefully 5 stars, I will give you a shout out on an upcoming episode. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, live accountably.